Petr Pavel. Ukraine deserves to join NATO, says new Czech leader.
Here's a summary of the article.
Czech President-elect Petr Pavel has told the BBC that Ukraine should be allowed to join NATO, as soon as the war is over. Mr. Pavel, a retired NATO general, said Ukraine would be morally and practically ready to join the Western alliance once the conflict had ended. I am proud of my country being one of the first to provide Ukraine with significant military help, he told the BBC. The Czech Republic was the first Western country to send tanks and infantry fighting vehicles, Soviet-designed T-72s and BMP-1s, to Kyiv, part of a series of deliveries of heavy weapons that reportedly began as early as March 2022. Probably very few people could imagine that Western countries would be willing to provide Ukraine with modern main battle tanks or long-range artillery or anti-aircraft systems, he went on. Ukraine has asked for 300 such tanks and says the West has so far promised to send at least 120. President-elect Pavel also said that he and other European leaders had a duty to explain to their skeptical, and in many cases frightened populations, of the sense in helping Ukraine. The Ukrainian military will be probably the most experienced military in Europe. Ukraine deserves to be part of a community of democratic countries.
This post received a score of 5,900, with an upvote ratio of 96%. Here are the top comments in response to this article.
It feels bizarre that we had a reclusive drunk for a president for 10 years. Now Pavel hasn't even been sworn in and he's already in major international news every single day. With Milo Zeman leaving the office, some of the final remnants of our East-aligned past are finally fading out. I really hope that in some time, Czechia will become a true Western liberal democracy.
I'ma be real. While his foreign policy positions are very positive and newsworthy, part of the reason is that he's very handsome.
He had some good photos floating around and that probably made him pretty popular alone. Then when it turned out he was pro-Ukraine, everybody just nutted and instantly loved him.
He also immediately spoke to the president of Taiwan, the morning after the election. Most countries avoid this, as it makes China super butthurt.
Butthurt seems to be fading. Nice to see it used again. Otherwise Russia might try this again in 10, 20 or 30 years?
Exactly. Ukraine joining NATO as part of a peace deal is the only option. It would ensure prolonged peace. Without it, it's just another delay in the inevitable Russian expansion.
And any deal where Russia accepts that Ukraine will join NATO is only possible when Russia loses. Which is why Ukraine needs Western weapons.
Why would either Ukraine or NATO need Russian permission? We avoided courting nations on Russia's border to preserve the peace. Russia has demonstrated that doesn't work. Nothing stopping us now.
Permission, no. Perhaps concession. In other words, there needs to be a situation where Russia doesn't view Ukraine joining NATO as provocation or escalation of the conflict. Which means the conflict needs to be resolved with a scenario that isn't, Russia won. But we are still very far from any resolution anyway.
I get your point, but I still disagree. Russia needs to be told that if Ukraine seeks NATO protection, then so long as it's accepted by NATO, that's what is happening. Russia can kick and scream, hold its breath. Whatever, but that's not their decision to make. Their concession is irrelevant, unless they're really willing to risk mad over Ukraine and Crimea.
Well, either Russia needs to lose so badly that they have no other option than to concede Ukraine joining NATO. Or NATO needs to realize that Russian warnings to NATO are just as threatening as China's final warnings. With the first one being the scenario that I think NATO prefers because it doesn't require NATO to grow any balls and doesn't risk a direct conflict with Russia. And both of them require the war in Ukraine to be somewhat resolved, which at the moment it's nowhere near to.
This video was automatically created by Reddit to speech. The article and comments in this video were selected from Reddit according to their upvotes, and any paraphrasing was performed by smmry.com, without any human intervention.